to our video chat of Donkeys and Dragons, where we spend about 15 minutes chatting about some topic related to software testing and Agile. Hi, I'm Lisa Crispin.
And I am Janet Gregory.
Today we have a special guest to help us talk about ethics in software testing as our topic for discussion. And our guest for today is Fiona Charles from Ontario, Canada. Yeah, woo! She does a lot of writing, consulting, speaking internationally, and she conducts awesome interactive workshops on software test management, difficult conversations, testing, all kinds of things. And last month, she did a keynote for the Agile Testing Days conference in Potsdam, Germany, called Human Impact.
Okay, and with that, we'll stop sharing and we'll get to where we want to be, which is chatting. So, hello, Fiona, and welcome to our chat. Both Lisa and I were at that keynote, and it was a little scary for some of us in the audience because your slides end up being something else because of technical difficulties. Even though I know you tested, you said we tested, but you still managed to get your human impact message across. I was thoroughly impressed, and it really shows the years of experience you have in talking. And you've been talking about testing and management for many years, but what we want to talk about here and what I'd really like to know is, how did you get into writing and talking about ethics in testing?
It actually goes back quite a long way. I published an article in Sticky Minds, probably better software, called Sophie's Choice in 2007. That was about being asked to lie on a project. And the next year, or the same year, actually, I think I gave a talk on it at Star West. That was a pretty traumatic experience, being asked to lie on a project. And in fact, I because I was working for a big company at the time, rather than being independent, and I knew they would probably be reluctant to pull me out of there, I got myself kicked out because there was absolutely no way I was going to stay there in those circumstances and be associated with what was going on with it. Anyway, that was kind of the first thing, and I did a few other things. An article called No Compromise, and one I did for Tea Time called 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast, which was about the lies that people tell on software projects. But most recently, I started looking at the software that we all use, the software that we are all exposed to, and thinking, I don't like what's going on here. I'm in love with software. I have been for hundreds of years at this point. I mean, since 1978, but I'm feeling less and less like it's something I'm proud of. And what really got me, and it's maybe a sort of trivial example, but in a way it's not, was one day I was reading The Guardian at breakfast, as you do, and I read about an AI algorithm that somebody had come up with that supposedly could tell if you were gay or straight from a photograph. And my jaw just hit the table.
Yes.
And A, I thought, why? And B, I thought, what could possibly go wrong? And I mean, think about that, right? And then I started seeing more and more examples of AI particularly, but not only AI, systems that could really hurt people that we didn't seem to be caring very much about or doing anything to prevent. I mean, if you go back to the Volkswagen diesel scandal.
Oh, yes.
I have no idea who was associated with that, but it was a big environmental issue. And there were software practitioners, obviously, who went along with that, who colluded with their management to pull something over on people.
So maybe not even colluded, and they may have, and some of them would have had to, but when we're thinking about ethics from a personal perspective, even, is it sometimes when we don't say something, even,
Exactly.
right? So it's not necessarily colluding and we just say, well, I didn't really agree to it, so therefore I'm not.
Yeah, but you know what? If you were there saying, nothing's going on, I can't hear it, you're colluding.
I guess so. Yes, true. All right. Yeah.
When you look at the software around us, there's some wonderful stuff, some absolutely wonderful stuff. But there's also some really damaging stuff.
There's a lot of
Sorry about that.
weapons of mass destruction.
Well,
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not just software, of course, it's hardware as well. But you know, the robot dogs that the San Francisco police are thinking to use with lethal force.
Oh, that's scary.
Yes.
I hadn't read that. Things like the drones scare me.
Yes, and me.
Right. Yeah. Because you have no control. You can't see. You can't do anything about it.
Well, exactly. And when those systems are given the ability to harm people without human intervention, that's very scary to me. It's very scary to me when software systems are operating without human intervention for some things. Now, of course, we know with things like process control, for example, of nuclear plants, you can't have a human in there making every decision. But those systems are incredibly robust. They're tested with great care.
Yeah.
And they're monitored. But
because they're deemed safety critical.
Absolutely.
Right. As soon as they're not falling under safety critical, then the rules change a little bit.
They do, but there have been, of course, failures with safety critical systems as well.
Of course.
You look at what happened with the 737 MAX Boeing planes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was about a software failure. It was essentially, well, it wasn't a software failure. It was software working as designed.
Yes.
And what the software was intended to do was to fly the plane, because apparently you couldn't trust the pilot to do it.
Yeah.
So software that's taking agency away from skilled humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we know that since fly-by-wire systems, which is what that falls under the envelope of, since those systems have been introduced, we have had fewer aviation accidents. So there's a balance there, right? Mm-hmm. But the balance, I think, has to be that someone like a skilled pilot still has to have the ability to intervene and to take control. Yeah. And of course, that means they have to be engaged all along. So you can't have them, you know, just letting the plane do its thing and sitting there with their feet up and smoking a cigar or something. Well, you can't smoke on a plane, but you know what I mean. I do apologize for that, and I just turned it off.
Okay.
Nobody ever phones me. I don't know. No. Anyway, so the pilot has to be engaged, just as we do with, say, autonomous vehicles.
Exactly.
You can't just let it carry on its own and then suddenly think, oh my God, I got to do something, because you won't be engaged. You won't be
ready for whatever it is you have to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Fiona, as you say, a lot of these things aren't new. We've heard about these things, and I've heard a few other really good talks on, especially the dangers of AI. But Janet and I were so inspired by your keynote, and I saw your one at Targeting Quality as well in September. And we've been bringing them up with people, and I've been kind of surprised of how interested people are in talking about it, and they want to learn about it. Are you finding people are more interested in this topic now and more looking for ways to be ethical in software development?
I think so. I think that people have been surprised. I mean, when I do a talk like the one I did at Targeting Quality, where I go through a whole lot of what I called horrible examples, I've had people come up to me afterwards and say, wow, we read about stuff, but we didn't realize how much of it there was. We didn't see how widespread the issues And I think that's part of it, because there we are being practitioners and squirreling away in our little piece of the tech universe, and we think what we're doing is okay, and it just doesn't occur to us to pick up on the other stuff.
Well, and it doesn't occur to us that it would be really easy for us to be sliding into a situation like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You also talked about it when you were talking about human impact. I remember you said something about being a target. Like we think about, say, stakeholders, but we don't consider the people who are harmed. And you gave the post office example in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's not really where I was thinking about a target, actually, because those people were actually users, and therefore people we would have considered stakeholders. I was thinking more about the people upon whom software systems are designed to operate. So for example, you go to get a mortgage. Now, it used to be that when you went to get a mortgage, they would look at your credit rating, they would, get all kinds of information about your income and stuff. They still do that. But now an algorithm decides, almost always, whether or not you're going to be given a mortgage. Yeah. And you don't have any insight into how that decision is made. You don't have any visibility. And you probably don't even know most of the time that an algorithm is involved and that it's not a human being. And you don't have any means to question that decision. The same thing happens in a much more harmful way, potentially, if you're a prisoner and you're applying for probation. In many jurisdictions, and I'm pretty sure in the one I'm sitting in right now, but certainly in many, the decision about whether to grant you probation or not, or under what terms, is made by an algorithm. An algorithm decides how much of a risk you are going to pose to the public. And if that algorithm has been trained on data, on historical data, as typically happens with machine learning, it's going to make that decision in a biased way, because the historical data that we have about people's convictions, about probations, about reoffending, is very much biased in North America, particularly, to a conclusion that people of color are more dangerous than white people. And that's not actually reflective of reality, but it is reflective of the past and of opinions in the past and of the way decisions were made. And we're just perpetuating that stuff. And
the trouble with AI is only as good as the data that was used to teach it.
Exactly. So it's not just an AI problem, of course. I mean, the UK post office system, or in fact, the Canadian Phoenix payroll system, were conventional systems.
Yeah.
And these are systems that big systems that were released before they should have been, and with inadequate testing, that have done a great deal of harm. Now, the Horizon system in the UK is a particularly awful example, because we know of at least 4 suicides associated with it, and we know that a lot of people were jailed wrongly because of quote evidence from the Horizon system. But Phoenix, payroll system, people were bankrupted because of their bills not being paid. There's apparently one suicide associated with it. There's another system in Australia that was known as robo-debt, which was developed in order to recoup, quote, overpayments that were given to benefits recipients. And it ended up concluding that many more thousands of people owed money to the government than actually did, and went after them. So very vulnerable people, typically people who hadn't much money and who were, not all that versed in dealing with society, many of them, were pursued relentlessly by the government to pay money that money that they didn't know. So conventional systems can also do a great deal of
Yeah.
harm.
So I'm going to ask one last quick question. Hopefully, no guarantee, of course, you've seen our holistic testing model. The idea that testing happens throughout the life cycle.
Yep.
Right. So I'm thinking that teams should be asking questions about ethics very early when first learning about a feature or a story. So very early in the process. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, I think so. I mean, we've always argued that testing, for instance, should be involved right up front.
Mhm.
And I think that's true of testing the ideas.
Yeah.
Which is really what the ethical choices are about, right? So asking questions like, what data are we going to collect? And do we need personal details?
Right.
What are we going to do with that data? How are we going to store it? How are we going to ensure that it doesn't get sold? How are we going to ensure that it's not vulnerable? How are we going to make sure that whatever is being done with a given system is secure, is going to be secure? So lots of questions like that. How do we know it's not going to harm someone? How do we know the data we have, that if we're developing an AI algorithm, how do we know that the data upon which this algorithm is trained is not biased? And how can we ensure that it won't be biased? So I think there are lots of questions. I mean, as I keep saying, I know I keep banging on about this, but we really have to start asking what could possibly go wrong right at the beginning and at every stage of development. We're not stupid people who are developing these things. We're bright people.
Hopefully.
And we have good imaginations. And you need to involve as many people as possible in asking those questions.
All right. And with that, thank you, Fiona. I'm going to have to get a list of those questions and we should share them on a blog someplace so that that would make a really good next blog, Lisa.
Definitely.
We talked a little bit about ethics in our last newsletter, but having those questions out there, learning what to ask.
Yeah, we had your 10 plus 1 commandments for ethical software.
Right.
Yeah.
Our last newsletter. So.
All right. So with that, we'll kind of wrap up here. Our 15 minutes is up. And so I'll just share the screen. Say thank you to Fiona for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fun.
So please feel free to contact us. We are easy to find. We're on the internet any place. You can look at us on any of these places. And with that, we'll say thank you. Read our blogs. I hope you enjoyed
subscribe
this.
to our newsletter, read our blog posts for more on them. We'll be talking about this more for sure.
Exactly.
And get in touch if you have any questions.
And thank you, Fiona. I could talk for hours on that. So
thank you, Janet and Lisa.